Let's get real. Welcome to TBC Today. This podcast features friends in and around the Triad Baptist Church community. Hear encouraging real-life stories from our weekly guests and inspiring insights from our host, Pastor Rob. To learn more about Triad Baptist Church in Kernersville, North Carolina, visit us online at tbcnow.org.
Welcome to episode 2 of TBC Today. And we're excited to be here with our host, Pastor Rob, who you met last week, or our episode last week, and with this week's guest, Jodie Anker. Now, Jodie's been at Triad for about 4 years, and she's a mother of 3 kids. But the exciting thing for us is she's the director of women's ministry, and this is a new position for her. She's been here for about, or been the director for about 3 months, 4 months? Yeah, so it's a new position. We're excited. Jodie, tell us real quick a little bit about your family.
So like I said, I have 3 children. My husband Matthew and I have been married for 17 years this June. And he's Marine Corps, so he's a Marine. He's going to finish off his 20 years here in about 2 years. So
great.
Looking forward to that.
So our women's ministry has about 10 different women's ministries under it currently, right? So we've got a lot of options, a lot of opportunities for women to connect and engage and to be discipled here at the church. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. I'm going to ask you some questions about that in a few minutes. But we're ready to get real. So we've got Pastor Rob here. He has flipped our timer for us. So we're going to let him take over the conversation.
Hey, Jodie, it is good to have you here today. I'm so glad that you could be a part of our recording today. And I think it'll be a help to people. When I think about when we first kind of really got this going, Shannon had come to me, who was over our ladies ministry and also over our ladies counseling, or really counseling in general. And she said she had to step back a little because she's got heavier duties with her teaching. So as a result of that, she had your name received, called you up, and we prayed over that ourselves, me and Shannon, and then you accepted the position after you prayed about it. Yeah. And so then I met with you, I don't know, 3 months ago, and one of the things that I most remember you telling me when we got together that day that sticks out to me is you said, Pastor Rob, I'm just a broken vessel, and I'm going to be used of the Lord. And I just thought that was something that stuck in my head from the conversation on that day. And so I thought it would have been neat to have you here and just share a little bit about what that means. And so I wanted to ask you to do that again with me and the group here today and all those who listen. But when you said broken vessel, what were you intending to tell me by that?
I know that probably kind of like a cliche statement, but there probably was a better way to say it. But yes, I really did. I felt like to everything that had led up to my life to that point just had kind of left me in pieces. And, yes, we were in the military. We moved more times than I can count in the 15 years thus far at that point. And every move, I just felt like it kind of crushed me. Everything that was going on, either a traumatic event or just the move itself. And I would kind of pick up my life full of pieces and have to rebuild it. And then just when I got it rebuilt, we would move again and something would happen and break me. And by the time I got to Kernersville, and around the time that you had asked me or when you talked about women's ministries, I just felt like I don't know what to do with all these pieces. I don't know how to build them back together. I had done it so many times, and at that point, I felt like it was dust. Heck, how do I build everything back up? And I had to kind of come to a point where that was going to be okay, and realize that God could still use me, because Satan tells you you can't be used.
Well, tell me, let's clarify that a little. So where did you guys start out? You got married?
Yeah.
And where were you?
We got married and we moved to Okinawa, Japan, this tiny island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
With the Marine Corps?
Yes, yeah. The Marine Corps took us there. I didn't choose to go there. It was a 3-year stay where they asked us to live there for 3 years. But I lived there for those 3 years, but Matt was in and out. He barely maybe lived on an island in a year. So our first 3 years of marriage, he was just gone basically all the time. And that was tough. You're trying to figure out marriage. And I knew nothing about military. I didn't understand it, and kind of jumping into the deep end for sure. And that island experience was just super tough in general. Was
so you had no children during those 3 years?
No, we had our first daughter there. So while we were there, we were also told we could never have children. So I wanted 7. I wanted a huge family. And Matt was leaving all the time, and then we found out we couldn't have kids. I just felt like, again, my life was kind of exploding, and God blessed us with our daughter, Oliviana. She was born in Japan, and
So that was really a miracle,
it
really.
completely miracle.
I mean, what was like wrong with you? Was it like just serious problems that they said it's definite, or just?
Well, kind of, yeah. I had had 2 surgeries up to that point with endometriosis, and they had to remove parts of my ovaries. I mean, I just didn't have very much. They just thought, you're just never going to be able to have children. And then there were other things that came up later on in my life where doctors look at it and they say, you should never have had children, never. Like, could not believe that we had 3 children. So to have Oliviana, we were so excited. It was very, very exciting to have her.
Well, tell us a little bit about that then. Did anything happen there that was kind of like added to that broken vessel piece?
Most definitely. Okinawa was very, very difficult. So we were on an island, no family, had my first child, which was exciting. But again, I was a new mom, a new wife, trying to figure out life. And then Matt got deployed. So he went to Afghanistan, and he was deployed with training and everything. It was just about a year, a little over a year. And we had a daughter who was just a baby when he left. So I was now figuring out life as a deployed spouse with a baby. And up until that point, you know, the island life, everyone's husbands are either deploying or on their way back from a deployment. There was just like a constant flow. And on the outside, it just looked like everyone was able to handle it fine. And I know that's not the truth, but I went into it thinking, okay, it's my turn. We can do it. I can do it. And it was in my own strength. I kept thinking, I can do this. I can do this. And what he was doing was very dangerous. And he would, within the first week that they left, there were already 2 major injuries. I mean, it hit home quick that this was going to be a long time.
And you get that information back as wives that there's a couple guys injured.
Yeah, immediately, as soon as they got out there. And then what Matt was doing was extremely dangerous, and he would call and say, and I never knew when he would call me or what was going to go on, but he would call and say, I'm going to do something. I won't be able to call you for X amount of days or weeks. And there was an understanding, and sometimes it was a vocal understanding, that this might be the last time we ever talk. And so I lived with that constantly, that this could be it. And you savor every moment. It has to be special and good, and you can't fight, you can't argue. Like, everything had to just be good, because you don't ever know. This could be it. And it wore on me. But again, I can do this. Everyone around me is doing it. All my neighbors, all of their husbands were deployed. So it was just kind of like, we can do this. But there was a moment where I felt I could no longer do it.
You just felt like it fell apart.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And he was in Afghanistan.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So I've shared a little bit of that story with you, where our daughter, who we didn't think we could have, became very ill. She had, I didn't know what it was, took her to the hospital, and they immediately quarantined me in a room with no phone and no internet. It was a hospital built in World War II, and not much had changed. I mean, there was nothing in that room. And they said, she's probably going to die. And I had no way of reaching family in the States.
What was going on with Oliviana that she could have
She
died?
had an infection in her eye that was about to jump to her brain. And they said it would be meningitis, and it would kill her. They said, she's not going to live through this. And just
Did
wait.
you have any kind of support system or church family or anything like that?
So-
or did you really feel like you were just alone on an island?
Yes and no. We had a very small church that was there, but it's hard. Okinawa, there's just not a lot of big churches. There wasn't a lot of support for that. And then the wives that, like I said, all my neighbors, 6 of us, all of our husbands deployed at the same time. So that was a huge support for me, but they didn't know where I was. Nobody knew. I took her to the hospital. And actually that kind of ties into a really sweet story, is they left their homes after I didn't show up, and they went searching for us at local hospitals.
Wow.
They found me. And I cried when she came through the door, because I was found. There was hope. There was somebody that could help me, at least hold my hand. But they told me that Oliviana's condition, she probably wouldn't live. And since Matt was deployed, they said, we'll send a Red Cross message. Now, I don't know if you or the viewers know much about that, but there's strict rules. They talked to us a lot about Red Cross messages before he left, and there's only 3 reasons why it wouldn't be delivered, and it would be delivered, but there's a message that would come back to me, and it was killed in action, missing in action, or wounded in action. And so I knew that since she was possibly going to die, that they would send him back home. Like there was certain reasons why they could send the service member home. So I was thinking he could come home. This could be done. I could kind of see like maybe this is why God's doing all of this, but I wasn't totally sure. And I kind of had to hold everything loosely because I didn't know if I'd lose the one thing I wanted more than anything was my child. And the 12 hours was like the hardest window, just waiting. Like Matt is going to get back to me. It's going to happen. He's going to tell me he's on his way home and I could have a relief. And at that point, my neighbors hadn't found us. My family in the States didn't know. Nobody knew that I was alone going through all this. 12 hours passed and heard nothing. And Oliviana's condition didn't improve, but it didn't get worse. So they just kind of kept, she's probably still going to die, but not yet. And we still didn't hear back from your husband. And I just remember sitting in that hospital room thinking, Lord, you're going to take everything away from me. And there was a point where I thought, honestly, that I was going to bury both my child and my husband, like everything I wanted, my whole world. And he just told me that he had to be enough. Like I had to come to a point where God was enough, even if I lost everything I wanted, everything that I was working for and building, he had to be enough.
Yeah.
So to kind of make a very long story shorter, she did improve. A lot of you know her. She's an amazing 15-year-old. And doctors was shocked that she improved. And word started spreading on the island that we were there, so neighbors would come. Matt's team member wives would start coming to visit, but no one would talk about Matt. They weren't allowed to. They just would say, we can't tell you. Well, you think worst case scenario. And I left that hospital, and they told me she could get it again. They don't know why she recovered. I was like, well, God saved her. And there was a mega typhoon coming that I needed to get home to safety. And we never heard from your husband.
Wow.
And the doctor handed me the discharge paperwork, and we both had an understanding of what that probably meant. And I was kind of walking away from one storm and maybe into another.
Wow.
You guys know.
Now you said, when you said, I had to come to this place where God is enough, is that the point? Do you feel like at that point there was something that just, okay, I'm going to have to rest in that?
Yeah.
And is that a sense of peace that you sensed there? Or was it more, well, you're all I got anyways, or was it?
It was kind of both. So I think God stripped away everything. I relied a lot on my husband. I relied a lot on my friends and my network, the group of wives. We did a lot together. And he took all of that away to where it was just God and I. But then, yes, there was a peace. But it was a daily, like a moment-to-moment struggle. Like I would sit and pray. I didn't even have my Bible. I didn't have a change of clothes. I had nothing. And I would just pray and be like, Lord, I have to give this to you. I'm stuck. I have nothing else to rely on. And then I'd be like, okay, I'm good. And then the next moment I'd be broken thinking, how could you let this happen? So it was up and down, up and down.
So the typhoon comes.
Yeah.
You're home at this
home,
point?
Yeah.
And you still hadn't heard from Matt?
No, it was several days.
And is that very unusual, or is that normal in the military?
Well, it depends. What he was doing, he would go several days without me hearing from him. And before I went to the hospital, he had said, I'm going on a dangerous mission. I won't hear from you. So it played into my fears, thinking worst case scenario. But it could be several days or weeks, hit or miss of when he could call me. But the fact that a Red Cross message was sent, that 12 hours, I should have heard right back from him. And I didn't. So
Which means it's not getting to him.
So they tracked it. It got to his unit. It was never delivered to him. So we know that
somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm. And I just thought I was hoping he was wounded. I was hoping that was it. That they were just waiting to see if Oliviana recovered to tell me bad news. But I just didn't know. And I just wrestled with that. It was horrible. And then
So that piles on everything else too. So you knew, they came and said, hey, they got the message to the unit, but that's all they knew.
Yeah. And then there was a general understanding of what, like unspoken, what that meant. And there was a lot of sympathy in their eyes for me, but no words were spoken. They just looked at me like, we're so sorry. And at one point, I would constantly be very aware of cars driving in the front of my house because they'll notify you if your spouse has died and they're in full uniform. And one car drove up and I looked out the window and the guy was in full uniform, and I just fell to the ground thinking, I can't, Lord, I just can't. Like, don't let him knock on my door. Like, I just can't do it. I really, really thought that he wasn't going to make it home. But he did.
How soon after that? Like for the time he came home?
He ended up coming home about a month and a half.
Month and a half.
After that, yeah.
Did you hear in between there then at all?
Yeah, he called me, finally got a hold of me. He was finally notified, and they had just held on to it. Matt is really, really, really good at what he does, and they didn't want to lose him. So it's against the law what happened, but his commander held on to it till she recovered and then gave him the message.
Till she recovered, and then gave him the message.
Yeah.
Because it would have affected him mentally, and so
they would have lost him. Like, Matt would have come back home to me, and then he wouldn't have gone back to Afghanistan.
I see.
And Matt is very, very, very good at what he does.
So it was almost a selfish thing to
100%,
say.
yeah.
There's no, that's true. Wow.
Something you said, though, you said you had to get to the place where God was enough.
Yes.
And I think it would be encouraging for all of us to hear, how do you get to that place? How do you mentally and spiritually get to that place where you're willing to relinquish everything you love and be content with just God?
I think he takes everything away, where it's just you and him. When he takes, if I had had maybe Matt there with me, or if I had had family that I could have called on, even just spoken to family or had them come, they live down the street, I don't think I would have relied on God as much. But he took everything away, and he kind of just spoke to my heart saying, I have to be enough. You have to be okay, because it was a real reality that I could lose everything. And what are you going to do then? It was kind of like an open-ended question between God and I. If I take everything, what would you do? And I just had to kind of come to the place, like, not necessarily wanting it, but accepting that if that's his will, I have to accept it and be okay with it.
Good. Well, one thing before we go on with the story here, one thing I'd like to just kind of point out is that was one of the things you described for me. That was the piece of being a broken vessel.
Yes.
And so the assumption I have then as a pastor is that if you've been through that, then I guarantee there's women that have similar experiences, and that's probably some of your passion to be involved in women ministry. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
But yet sometimes they won't let you see that, or almost they'll maybe keep guarded about that. It takes time. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think as women in general, we want to look the part and act like we have our life together. And it's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to let down your guard. And Satan, he's so good at telling you your trial, your struggle is individual to you. No one else in the world has ever gone through what you're going through or would understand what you're going through. And he isolates you in that. And if you're willing to open up and say, well, I've gone through this experience, you're going to find so many other people that have gone through something similar, if not almost identical. And there's comfort in that, because you can relate to them. And sometimes they're further in that journey of healing, and sometimes they're not, and you can kind of help them along. So.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing I noticed about you is why you have such a heart for women specifically, is just you have been there, you know what that feels like, and so they're feeling that. And I just think your ability to empathize and to enter into these ladies' lives has been really a blessing to me from the outside looking in.
Thank you.
And so it's great. Okay, well, let's go back onto the story here. Okay, so you're in Okinawa. You find out he's okay. Now, I know there's more to being, like, not a broken vessel, but, like, crushed more.
Yes.
So tell us a little more about that.
So I kind of felt like, okay, I've been through this experience. We got through. And I had to rely on the Lord. Matt came home. There's a whole process of reintegrating back as a family, and just a lot that has to happen. Both of us went through a lot of trauma. And about 2 months after he got home, we found I was expecting again. And I thought, wow, okay, so we couldn't have any children. We went through all of this struggles and trials and heartache, and this was like the rainbow at the end of this horrible storm. And I just felt like this is what God was going to use to kind of bring us all back together. We had also had orders to leave the island, which I was more than willing to do. I was ready to get back to the States and be around. It's beautiful, and I loved it, but what I went through on there, it was just really hard. Yeah. So we were getting ready, but there was just joy. I just felt like joy was returning back to our lives with this baby. And the day before we left, I lost that baby. And I just remember thinking, I don't know if I can recover from this, because I had gone through so much, and I kind of put all of my hope in that pregnancy, that this was what was going to get us through. And when I lost it, I kind of lost hope. And then we moved.
Wow. How far were you along?
About 2 months.
2 months. And you were in Okinawa still, right?
I lost the baby in Okinawa, and then the next day we flew back to America. Literally the next day.
Wow. Were you just like totally deflated?
I was numb. I was completely numb. I thought, Lord, you gave this to me, and then you took it away. And he kept reminding me, you got to be okay with this. You got to be okay with it. And some trials you go through and you can see, okay, God taught me this and I've learned this. But some trials you still wonder, but why? I don't know why God took that baby. And I know it's he has a purpose. I still don't know why. But we moved from there to Quantico, and I was broken. I just had gone through so much and not sure, again, how to put everything back together. It took a while to recover.
So if God doesn't always tell you why you go through that, then how do you feel like you put things back together?
So he gave me a verse, and I had to flip back through my Bibles because I had underlined it for Okinawa, but it was in Habakkuk 3:17 through 19. And it I related a little bit because it talks about how everything is going wrong. You know, the fields will be barren, the flocks are gone. So
That's a good one.
It says, though the fig tree may not blossom, nor fruit be on the vine, though the labor of the olive may fail, and the fields yield no food, though the flock may be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord, and I will joy in the God of my salvation. And I just remember God telling me, I can take it all away, but you can still be joyful in me. And later on in the verse, it talks about I am your strength. He is your strength. So I felt hopeless, no joy, and no strength. And all in that verse, it encapsulated everything can be taken away from you. You still need to have those things. You can still do it. And that I really held to, because I tried in Okinawa to do it in my own strength. I couldn't. I failed. And it was only God's strength that got me through. And then after that, just finding the joy.
So really, almost God's asking you, okay, I'm going to give you no motivation to pursue me. I'm going to take that away. Now, will you pursue me?
Yeah.
And you had to literally do that.
Kind of to pick yourself up. And I'm speaking at it from years of healing. In the moment, it was ugly looking, crying out, and Lord, why? You're angry, you're depressed, you're frustrated, you're grieving, and it wasn't pretty. But God kept telling me, find my strength in Him, and find joy in Him.
That's good. I like that. All right, we'll go on.
Oh, but there's more. There's so much to the story. We got pregnant again with our son Titus, and again, didn't think we could have kids, and I was very nervous because I had just lost one. And I thought, well, what, open-handed, you're going to take this one? I don't know. And a couple months into that pregnancy, we found out I had a tumor growing, and they said, it's probably cancer, and you're probably going to lose this baby. And I just thought, are you kidding me? It was a boy. We wanted a boy. Matt wanted a son. And they wanted me to terminate the pregnancy so that I could have treatments. And I was told no, just gonna. So I was pregnant with Titus the whole time, but I didn't think I'd get to keep him. I kind of just felt like.
You're going to lose him.
Oh, yeah.
Why did they want to terminate it?
So they could get the tumor out, and they thought it was cancer, so that would save me.
Well, not just wait. I mean, was there something about a tumor having to come out right away?
Yeah, they just thought if it was cancer, then it would spread and it would get worse, and they were trying to minimize that.
Where were you at again? Quantico?
DC, yeah,
okay.
DC area. Yeah. So wrestled with that the whole pregnancy, just up and down, and having to say, God, you could take it all away again. I don't know. I've already suffered loss. I don't want to go through it again. God gave us Titus. It was just a miracle. And every time we go in, we would measure him and measure the tumor. And it was just like, it was almost
Wow.
comical. Like he would grow, it would grow. And he was born and he was fine. And then, they took out, it was the size of a cantaloupe. I mean, it had gotten really big. And it was transitioning to cancer. So,
and never had metastasized or anything,
No.
just kind of.
No.
And so you have the baby, Titus, and then you immediately have to go in for surgery?
Shortly, it wasn't immediately because my body just couldn't handle it. My
Mm-hmm.
emotions couldn't handle it. So I kind of just like tried to forget about it for a little bit, but I couldn't. And yeah, I had to have surgery. So that was I just didn't know if I could keep him and what was going to happen. And then now it's my health and I've got 2 babies. And again, Lord, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm going to try to keep strong, keep faithful. And then we got pregnant with Sophia. And we found out we were pregnant with her, and she was a twin. We had twins with her. And I thought, yes, I'm behind. I wanted 7. Wasn't supposed to have any, so I was great with it. And getting ready to go on vacation, and we drove because I thought, I don't want to lose these babies. I was very conscious of it. And I'm from Colorado, and went and saw family in Colorado, and I had a very severe complication. We lost 1 twin, and during the complication, they didn't really tell me what was going on. They rushed me to the hospital. I was in an operating room. I didn't really know why. And the doctor came to Matt and said, you need to go pray, because hospital protocol is I come back and I ask you, do you want me to save your wife or your 1 twin? You've lost 1. And the doctor happened to be a friend of ours as I was back in Colorado, and he went and prayed. He was a godly man. And I didn't know all that was going on, but he came back and he said the condition that your wife is in is basically this could get worse at any moment, and we cannot save her. Even if she's in the hospital, even if she's in an operating room, she will instantly die. Like, there's nothing we could do. And Matt just looked at him. He said, so the protocol is to take the baby to save your wife. As soon as the baby was gone, she would live. And Matt and I said, no, we're not going to do that. And the doctor was a Christian. He said, I don't want to ask you that. He actually ended up getting in a lot of trouble from the hospital because he wouldn't take Sophia. And then it was just a daily.
That's illegal?
Well, it's hospital protocol, and he went against it, basically. He said, I'm not taking her baby. And they kind of went like, well, let's just see how she goes every 12 hours. And I was in the hospital.
How far were they trying to get you where you could deliver?
I was only 12, 13 weeks. I mean, the baby wasn't viable for a long time. I spent a long time in the hospital there. Matt Marine, he had to go back to Quantico. And I
again.
So here I am
And
left
you got
alone,
2 small
and I had
children.
2 toddlers.
Wow.
So God ordained it to where I was at least near family
In
this
Colorado.
time. So my sister and my mom, they took care of my littles. But it was just me and God in the hospital again, and I thought, I don't want to lose another baby. And they told me, and I think it was kind of cruel, they said, you can't get emotional. It will cause this complication to get worse, and you'll die. I mean, they said it just like that, and I just was like, I just lost a baby, and
How do you do
I
that?
could die at any moment. Like they were just, it was the most extreme of situations, and I couldn't sit up to eat. I couldn't shower but every couple days. I mean, it was ridiculous. I just had to lay there. And again, God stripped away everything, and he said, am I enough? I took 1, and at any moment I could take you and the other. And that was a different stripping of, I could take you this time. And I just had to, I wrestled with that one a lot. I don't want my kids to lose their mom, and I don't want to lose another baby. And they told me every conceivable thing would happen with Sophia. Lots of doctors wanted to come and see her and study me, because what happened was illogical. It was an absolute miracle that I survived. I should not have. So they did all these studies, and all these professionals came, and the best doctor in Colorado came. And she told me, well, you need to abort this baby. You lost too much blood. She's never going to live. She's going to have all these problems. She said she's going to have spina bifida and a cleft palate. And I was like, I don't care. It's not for me to take. If God's going to take her, that's fine, but it's not my choice. And she even told me that Matt and I would get a divorce, because she knew Matt was in D.C. and I wasn't with him. And she's like, you guys will get a divorce over this. And I reached a point where I was like, I can't handle this anymore. But then they're like, don't stress out. Don't get overwhelmed. You'll die. So I just
And Matt's not there at all?
no, he would fly in as much as he could. We drained our savings flying, lots and lots of flying. But he would only come at like Friday evening at 11:30 at night, and he'd have to leave on Sunday. It was a very short window. And I couldn't really see my toddlers because if they jumped on me, it would kill me. It was just a very weird dynamic. And I read through Psalms a lot and David lamenting. And I felt like, okay, David, if you can say these things to God, I feel like I can maybe say those things to God.
That's good.
If you can be as
That's good.
vulnerable.
Yeah.
So you've said over and over, you embraced God was enough. Did you ever question God, though? Did you
Absolutely.
Did you question, like, have I done something, or do you
Yeah,
hate me? Or
I read through Job a little bit too, like, and then he reminded me again of Habakkuk, like all of these things can happen and still find joy, and yeah, I did. I definitely questioned God, and again, I'm speaking, it's past. In the moment, it was ugly. It was not pretty.
wow.
But I really look at it like, this is my evaluation. Look from the outside. I've heard it, a little more than this, but I look at it kind of like, okay, God, you're enough, but it's almost like you can say that, but you got to learn it.
Yeah.
And the only way you can learn it is through your pain.
Yeah.
And your pain drives you to this place. And so each time you get this little bigger pain come in your life, it's like, oh man, I can't take any more. But in the process of that, it's almost like you found a strength to trust.
Yeah.
And that's why I would say the thing I see in your life is not just your willingness to deal with this, but to be a kind of, I would call it a woman of strength, that you're willing to move into your world and into your life and into other people's lives with the strength that God's given you and showed you that I am enough. It's the only way I think you could have learned it. I don't think you can teach that to anybody. I think you have to actually go through it. And so I think of you being a sidewalk counselor now, with helping these ladies to not choose abortion. And that is incredible to me. That strength comes out of you that you say, I think I can help someone with that. My story has parallels that could really make these ladies think I can help them. So that's kind of my thoughts. I mean,
finding the purpose in your pain, I think, is a really big lesson that God teaches. And it's a constant lesson. I mean, it's not ever done, not when you think it's done. But yeah, that's what I'm hoping, that God has led me through all these trials and others that I haven't mentioned. And there's a reason. There's someone that it can touch. There's someone that it can bless. And then it's okay. He got me through it, and I can use it.
So when she said broken vessel, she wasn't making that up.
She wasn't making it up.
Because you hear that in songs, and you hear it in, know, but when you hear it in her life, it's just kind of cool to it's just so neat how the Lord just kind of orchestrated her life in a way that nobody wants.
And I think it's safe to say, though, we've talked about so much of the brokenness, but God's also blessed you with a very fruitful, great life, right?
Yes.
What would be one of the highlights of your life? What's one of the greatest things or the greatest joys?
Definitely bringing all three of those babies home. I mean, I felt like I went to battle for them. It is a huge joy to have those children that we have.
Awesome.
And then marrying Matt, definitely kind of a four-way tie.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are the best parts. And there's been blessings upon blessings, and just coming here in this church and the healing that's happened here for me, and being able to stay here, being able to live here, it's huge.
So tell us quickly how the TBC Women's Ministry impacts you and encourages you, and then how you want to impact and encourage those that you lead and that you're teaching and discipling.
Right. So Pastor Rob asked me to take this on, and I just thought, wow, this is daunting. This is huge. And it is still. But the women in this church, they love the Lord. What I keep finding is there's a passion to serve. There's a passion to love on others. They want to get involved, and that's exciting to be around. It's infectious. So that's what I'm encouraged by, just to see what's going to happen. What's the next thing? And then what was your second question?
Well, what's a goal or something you want to help with leading this women's ministry?
I kind of see myself as I want to be the greatest cheerleader of all these groups, their advocate. I want to be, what can I do to help you to move forward? I just see women's ministries kind of exploding. Something that encourages my heart a lot to hear is when new members come to our church and they say, your church is just so loving. I'm like, yes, we did it.
That's great. That's encouraging.
Yeah.
Well, that's
it is.
great. Is there anything else you want to say? We kind of run out of time here, but is there
No, it's
anything
okay.
that you would like to say as you close to ladies or anything else? Anything that was on your mind?
Just, it took a long time and a lot of trials to go through. And there was a point in my life where I thought, okay, I've gone through them all. Like, that's it. I'm good. I've learned all I need to. But God said, no, there's still more. And you'll reach a point where you feel like you can't go on. And that's kind of where God wants you to be, because we don't do these things in our own strength. He wants us to know it's only by His strength. And then don't lose your joy. My life verse is out of Luke, where it says, if you be silent, then the rocks will cry out. And I just love that picture. I think it's funny. But if I stop rejoicing, if I stop praising the Lord, then the rocks are going to cry out. And I just think I'm not going to have those rocks cry out for me. Like, I'll do it.
That's good. That's good. Hey, Jodie, thank you so much for being here today. It's been wonderful, and
Thank
just
you.
so pleased that you did that. We're going to have you back, because I'm sure you got more stories and more.
Yeah.
But it's wonderful, and thank you for being here today. And we pray that God will put His hand upon your ministry and what you're doing here at Triad.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks for listening to us at TBC Today, our podcast. If you'd like to learn more about our church, you can visit us online at tbcnow.org. To learn more about the TBC Women's Ministry, which has about 10 sub-ministries to it, you can check them out on our website, or they have their own Facebook and Instagram, and we'll put those links here in the bio, and we want you to check that out. If you enjoy this episode, share it with a friend, like it, rate us, let us know how we're doing, and we hope you have a great week.
Thanks for joining us this week on TBC Today. We want to connect with you, so make sure to visit our website, tbcnow.org, and subscribe, rate, and review the show in iTunes, Spotify, or Amazon Music. Don't forget to share this episode with a friend, and be on the lookout for our next conversation.